Andrea. Something we have been hoping for since the start of time is happening today. Are you ready?
I'm so excited.
So am I. And this is Eric.
This is Andrea.
And this is Hallmark Mysteries and more.
This podcast was created by fans for fans and is not affiliated with or sponsored by Hallmark or the Hallmark channel.
Well, Andrew, we have a guest, and today's guest is none other than Dylan Neal, otherwise known as Henry Ross from Gourmet Detective. Hello, Henry. Oh, geez, see? That's all.
I'll answer
I am.
Yeah. Hey, guys. How are you? Henry, Dylan, whichever works. You know, I'm here.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm very excited to have you on because you were probably one of the first actors that were probably my favorite back when you were on Cedar Cove. And I was like, oh, I really like this guy and his sense of humor. And then seeing you on Gourmet. So I'm very excited to be on and chatting with you today.
Well, I'm happy to talk to you guys today. Thanks for having me on.
And you should actually feel honored because Andrea has a very busy life. She teaches like 17 different versions of yoga and personal coaching, really? Tennis, has 2 little kids. So she rarely ever does interviews. And when I'm like, hey, guess who agreed? Andrea's like, clear the calendars.
Well, it's a Sunday too. So this day is a little more.
Well, that helps, right?
So,
well, I'm honored that you have agreed to appear, Andrea. And that's terrific. That's great.
Yeah. So, well, let's kind of throw it to you. Right now, you're living in Lisbon. What brought you there, and how's it been going?
Well, I mean, that would take 2 hours just to answer that question. There's a lot of reasons, not necessarily one reason. One is, living in Europe had always been on the bucket list for my wife and I. We have 2 kids, and they're teenagers, and if we weren't going to do it now, I mean, soon the kids are going to be off on their own. They're going to university next year. And this opportunity to broaden their horizons in the rest of the world was still an opportunity while they're living under our roof. And so that was one thing that we wanted to do. And another is California and Los Angeles became very, very different than when I first moved there in maybe, 92. And our industry had changed a lot. My wife is a TV writer, producer. I think some of your audience will know that we frequently write together, work together. We've done a number of things at Hallmark, but she works on her own as well with TV. But so much of our industry is done online now. So for me as an actor, I was never walking into a room for auditions in person. Our meetings, especially after COVID, always online. So, and then when I did work as an actor, I'd worked in LA maybe once in the last 10 years. Both my wife and I are Canadian. There's a lot of reasons why studios and networks will hire us or we get attached to stuff, specifically because we're Canadian and it's going to be shot in Canada for all the tax reasons. And I can explain that later. So anytime I worked, it was 99.9% with certainty it was going to be in Canada. So again, if I didn't want to be in LA, there was no reason for us to be in LA anymore. And so you put all of these things together and we sort of just looked at ourselves one day and we said, why don't we consider moving? And we didn't know where it would be. We considered going to other states. And then as we just kind of kept looking into it and researching, well, maybe now's the time to do that Europe thing. And as you start drilling down, well, where would we want to go? And you got weather and tax issues and other things that you're going to kind of consider. We ended up in Portugal for the same reasons that a lot of expats all over the world, not just the US or Canada, but from all over the world have been kind of flooding into Portugal over the last few years. And it wasn't easy to do during COVID, that's for sure. It was really complicated and challenging, and we don't speak the language. We're working on that. My wife's way ahead. She's fantastic at languages. I'm horrible. But, it was challenging, but we made it. And we live in a place called Cascais, which is like 20 minutes outside of Lisbon. It's really beautiful here. It is sort of like a little Disney resort. It gets a lot of tourists. It's sort of like almost the French Riviera of the Iberian Peninsula, and a lot of Europe comes to Cascais during the summer to get away. It's beautiful here, and just beaches everywhere, and the winters are really mild, and there's lots to like. There's lots of craziness as well anywhere, especially with EU. No one comes to Portugal for streamlined bureaucracy or business efficiency. There's lots of things that'll make you pull your hair out, but that's no matter where you are. American healthcare billing is not the biggest joy in life either. So anyways, that long-winded reason why we're here. I don't know how long we'll be here. It's not necessarily a forever thing, but it's a for now thing, and we're enjoying our time.
Sounds dreamy.
Well, as I, made the mistake of introducing you as Henry at the beginning. You are obviously Henry Ross from Gourmet Detective. So how much of Dylan Neal, are you like a foodie and a talented chef in real life?
No, I'm absolutely not. No, do you want to go over how this came to be? Because that'll determine sort of better how I'm Henry, because there's no reason why I would naturally be Henry. I'm not a foodie, really. I mean, I love food like anybody, but I'm not a great cook. I'm not nearly as crazy kind of as Henry. There's not a lot of me really in Henry, other than that you always bring a big chunk of yourself into whatever role you're playing. And as the creator, writer, exec of this franchise, I was really free to create Henry however I saw him, because he's absolutely nothing like the books. This is technically based on books, but if you've ever looked at one of these, it looks nothing like the books. The only thing we took really is the name, the Gourmet Detective, and then sort of the concept. But we, my wife and I, Becky, we completely changed everything to suit our own purposes, but to also make it palatable to Hallmark. Because the books, no offense to the Peter King estate, but they're very misogynistic and really not suitable for Hallmark. So we just reverse engineered everything to sort of make it work for us, even though the final product that you have seen, and I think you're starting this because you're going to be reviewing the first Gourmet, what you ended up seeing is not exactly what I sold to the network or what I intended. But once you go through the Hallmark development gauntlet, you end up with what you end up with. So we can talk about that as well.
We will.
This to be.
Well, a question then is, had you have the monkey parchment coffee though?
No.
Oh, come on, Dylan.
I know, right? I mean, it sounds so appealing. It's actually truly monkey saliva re-chewed up beans, if I remember.
Oh, I Googled.
I was just looking for, in that moment, the most esoteric kind of coffee that you could find. And when I saw that on Google, I said, you got to be kidding me. Of course, I got to use that. I'm just amazed Hallmark let me keep it, because they really they didn't let us keep much of anything that we ever proposed.
Oh, interesting. What if Andrea and I were to visit you in Portugal? Then you're obviously not making us dinner. What are you going to take us to go get then? What's a great Portuguese?
Oh yeah, you wouldn't want, like, if you're coming to Portugal, don't come for my cooking. My God, no. I mean, maybe when I was in LA, I had this beautiful entertainer's backyard, and so I had a really good barbecue set up. And so I'm fine with a barbecue, but I don't have that where I am right now. No, we go into Lisbon and have some. I take you to one of the many famous rooftop restaurants or bars right in downtown Lisbon, overlooking this 1,000-year-old city with views to the Tagus River, and we would have we'd have sunset cocktails, and then just some of the best food you've ever had. And yeah, I think that would be much more in order than waiting for me to burn something for you.
Well, last of the fun, silly questions, but
yeah.
You've played Doug in Dawson's Creek, Jack in Cedar Cove, Bob in 50 Shades of Grey, and Henry from Gourmet Detective. Does not sound like Henry is it. Which one of those is most like you, actually?
Let's see. So,
Or you could yank out another character from. I mean, you've been in one or two things.
Gosh, which one is most like me? I don't know if any of them are like me, frankly. I don't think we saw much of Bob in 50 Shades. I don't even know who that guy was. Doug, and I don't have any siblings, so that was all about sibling rivalry on Dawson's Creek, and being a bit of an ass older brother who had a heart of gold, though. He was kind of looking out for him. I don't know. I think there's a part of me that's a little bit of an uptight guy, and Doug was kind of uptight. Yeah, maybe sadly, I'm mostly like maybe a cross between Doug and Henry, because I can definitely be silly, and Henry can be silly. So maybe how about we go with the cross between Doug and Henry? How about that?
You're the guest. You can be whatever.
Okay, that's right. It's my answer. Damn it, we're going with that.
Well, you've talked about that your writing partner and producer is your wife. So how do you guys balance that work life? Like, do you have a shut off time, or is this something that like 10 o'clock at night, you're like, I got a great idea.
35 years later. Look, it's wonderful. And at the same time, I don't think either of us would recommend it. There's something to be said about a husband and wife having their own space and their own time. So I think we're both envious of those families, those traditional families where one or both get to go off to their office or their work and their group of people that they go work with. And then you come home at the end of the day and you share all your stories about what happened at the office or wherever it is. And you get to come back and spend time and catch up. And so you don't overstay your welcome with your spouse. When you live together 24/7 and you're raising kids and you just simply walk from the bedroom to your office downstairs and you punch in and then you punch out and then you just walk to the kitchen and you start preparing dinner or helping kids with homework, you can get a little claustrophobic. So you've got to have a really good relationship. You just do it. You got to have a really good foundation, because otherwise it'll kill you. It'll tear you apart, because you are going to fight and you are going to, like your writers, right? You're going to have your arguments. And this is your wife. So it's not like your colleague. You go, oh my God, honey, you wouldn't believe what an asshole Bill is, right? By the way, are we allowed? I don't mean to cuss, but I don't want to get like bleeped out. Like you can tell those horror stories and have those battles and leave them at the office and then come home. But if it's with the same person and your office is your home, you got to navigate that carefully and you got to figure it out. And so I guess we've just kind of figured it out, right? Like we're generally pretty good. In our battles, I think one of the things that work really well for me and Beck, we really share a brain creatively. It's very rare that we don't love the same movies, the same TV shows, the same decorating for our own house. Like we love the same to decorate the same. And that comes to our sensibility when we're creating stuff. We just share a brain that way. And so that's maybe the requirement. I think that would be the requirement with any writing partner. Obviously, if you're at odds the whole time, it's not gonna work. And then the other thing is that my wife is really the real talent. She's a really talented writer. She was admitted into the Warner Brothers writing program, which is like they allow 17 people out of like, I don't know how many thousand people apply every year. And then she kind of won it. I mean, it's not really a contest, but her work was selected to represent the class. Like she's been a rock star her whole career. So I definitely take second place in the writing room. And when we have a disagreement over something, like it's very rare that I'm ever going to win that argument. And so I generally, if there's a disagreement, I defer to Beck on most things, because she's forgotten more than I'll ever know. And that's just a fact. So it's just lucky that we generally agree. But I would say, anyone contemplating this, tread carefully, because it's definitely not for everybody. Yeah.
So at dinner, you're sitting here telling your wife, like, "Oh my God, you cannot believe, what a jerk my coworker was today."
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And then the mashed potatoes gets thrown at my face. And, yeah.
All right. Well, before we were recording, we talked about this, that you and I have been talking for a few years now, and one of the things was you very early on said, "Hey, listen, there's the fan world of movies and entertainment, and then there's the business side, and rarely ever do they actually match." And it's been very enlightening, and I appreciate our conversations that we've had. But you've been doing this for a few years now. What has really changed? Like you were talking about the audition aspect of it. But what's really changed over the years? Like one of the things I know is just decisions are so much more data driven than, studio executives sitting around thinking, I think this is a hit, right? It's like algorithms and, what's going to hit what demos and things like that versus, hey, this is really good quality.
I think it's always been data driven. Yeah, I mean, it's show business, right? The old adage, and it's always about business. We're not in a charity industry. The movies have to make money, or else there's just not going to be movies. So it's always been data driven. However, of course, there's been changes. Lots of documentaries on the topic. Once Jaws came in and the summer movie was born, and event programming by a studio was born, that really kind of changed the algorithm because so much money could be made. And so really, I think late 70s is when that shift in film changed. And television has generally just been eroding audience share. Not just recently, there's figures that'll tell you ever since I Love Lucy that audience erosion has been happening since the 50s. And it's just that we talk about it more. And then there was the major, well, there's been several disruptions, obviously, from broadcast to then cable, and then cable was eating away. And then we're now in the streaming wars. And what really compounds everything, and it's not talked about, people don't really actually understand what's going on, is our industry is completely broken. And it's not just because of so many outlets. That is a problem. The consumer has so many different choices. Like I've not watched broadcast TV in maybe over 10 years, and I'm in the business. And if I'm going to go and relax and just zone out, I'm frequently going to go to YouTube. And I'm going to watch one of my stupid little niche things that he may have 2 million followers, or he might only have like 100. Like I've got bizarre tastes, from like building log cabins out in the woods to home renovation shows to whatever. It has nothing to do with broadcast TV or movies. I'm just watching some guy in his living room, right? Like people watching you right now. We never had to compete with that 20 years ago. We still had to be part of the centralized control of media, which was studios or networks or at least cable and streamers. But what is beyond even the fractionalized of outlets is inflation in the world. And everything is becoming impossibly expensive, from your groceries to your gas to your housing. But of course, Hollywood is one of the most expensive industries in the world at the best of times. It's up there with aerospace in terms of expense. And so when you throw inflation, and we're talking global, doesn't matter where you try to run to, and that's why Hollywood's running, right? That's why there's no work in California, and it's probably never going back. I hate to break the news to Governor Newsom. And it's not really going to just go to New Mexico or Florida or New York. It's always going to be going to Canada. But if Canada messes things up, it's going to go to Australia. It's going to go to Eastern Europe. It's going to follow wherever the cheapest currency is, wherever the cheapest labor is. And that's never going to stop. Doesn't matter how many bills, how many tax credits the U.S. tries to put in. You've got American standard of living expenses for labor, You got the US dollar, which is the strongest currency in the world, and that's never going to change as long as it's the global reserve. And so you have a broken global economy of major, major inflation, which is a whole separate topic, right? Now we're talking about Jerome Powell issues and credit ratings and debt spirals, and how are we going to pay not just the US debt, but all these other countries have their own debt. And so inflation is not going away anytime soon. That affects every industry, especially Hollywood. And so then when you put cost control into how streamers are going to get their profit margins, when the fact is almost none of them make a profit. Again, this is a really big topic. I could talk a long time about it. Short answer is the industry is broken. I don't see how they're actually going to fix it, certainly not in the near time. And in the meantime, there's not a colleague I know who's not contemplating what am I going to do for the rest of my life because I'm not making it. And at shocking levels, too. I'm not just talking about the regular guy who's always going to be struggling, but for people who've made very comfortable livings, they're panicked. And I'm just thankful that I got my ducks in a row a while back, and I financially don't need to work now. I got a portfolio. I'm fine. But that was because I saw this coming. Also, one of the reasons why I got out of California 4 years ago when I did, and went to Portugal, because I could see our industry was heading for a rocky time. I'm a guy in my 50s. It's definitely coming to an end at Hallmark, which was my main meal ticket. So I needed to take care of myself and my family. And so, if anything, I'm more of a financial investor now than I am an actor, writer, producer. I still have my foot in that world, but thankfully I don't need it. All of my friends who do need it are stressed, and I don't see an answer. Isn't that depressing? Sorry to bring it down. But
well, no, like
that
I say,
is the reality. The reality is the industry is completely broken, and there is no short-term fix.
well, like I said, that's where you've been really helpful for me understanding the business versus us just as fans. So appreciate it. It, like I say, it is
and that's
rough.
not just Hollywood. I guarantee you, everyone watching, right? How is your industry doing? Is there anyone saying, "Oh my God, it has never been better for us. I could just go buy a house tomorrow"? How's that grocery bill? How's your health insurance? How are those bills looking? We all know there's some major issues going on, right? And that gets into the political arena, but actually it's not going to be solved by Democrats or Republicans. It's bigger. So Hollywood, like everybody else, is greatly affected. It's just that our industry is so expensive. It's so expensive. And so when you're a little player, it gets really scary. It's scary for the big guys, Netflix and Disney, and so they have to always manage their budgets. But you imagine for the smaller guys, and that includes Hallmark, these are scary times for the smaller players, and then for the individual artist and crew member. I really feel for all my friends back in California, because I don't think the good times are ever coming back to California in the entertainment industry. It just the money, the math doesn't make sense, and yet you have all of these generations of people who've done amazing work. You got crew members that they're like the third generation in the film industry working crews, and the volume of work is just probably not going to come back. Maybe long term, like everything is cyclical. I'm sure there's going to be solutions. Like there has to be some solutions economically for different industries. Maybe long-term California can figure something out. But as long as cost of living is what it is in California, and you've got all the budget guys going, I need to trim 70% fat off this budget, you just don't go to California to do that.
So do you think everyone having their own streaming channel is probably not a great idea for all of the different channels, such as Hallmark?
Well, that's a complicated topic too. You have to keep up with how your industry and technology is moving. You can't put your head in the sand, or you're going to get run over. And so Hallmark, and again, I'm not privy to those particular decisions, obviously, at Hallmark or anywhere. but no doubt that you had to play in the streaming wars. Hallmark has done a couple of versions of this, right? They had Hallmark Now. I think they got something like a Hallmark Plus or something, right?
Yep.
My question there is, they got some kind of arrangement, I think, with Peacock or Paramount, right?
Peacock.
So my question is, and I'm not criticizing, I'm like you guys, I'm wondering.
Yep.
So Hallmark's a really small place. They need every subscriber they can get. And you got your own streamer, which you're going to charge whatever fee that is. And I know they just tried to get their new TV series with Andy to go on that service first, right? And there was a big uproar and everyone revolted. And so they backpedaled and said, oh, okay, we'll put it back on the channel first, right? It was a good play, not going to happen. The problem is that requires you to pay a subscription. But if I have a choice and I'm a consumer, I can only maybe have 2 or 3 streamers at most, and I got Peacock. Well, Peacock gives me everything NBC has, plus other stuff. Plus, I get Hallmark Now. Well, why would I pay for Hallmark Now? I'll just go over to Peacock. So I don't understand Hallmark's strategy there, other than that they're getting money from Peacock to do that. And if you're struggling, you take every penny you can get. But aren't you shooting yourself in the foot by partnering with other people? I now have a choice. Where am I going to put my $5? I'm going to put it with Peacock, not just with Hallmark and only get Hallmark. I'm going to get Hallmark and Peacock and NBC. So I don't understand that logic. Obviously, there's an answer. We're not dumb people, but I just don't see it. I don't get it.
Yeah, I've been critical of that as well, and just wanting to know what their idea was behind it. And I think they should have rolled it out after the Christmas movies. Personally, I kind of voiced that. I'm like, why didn't you do this lead up and then do the big release of Hallmark Plus in January and then have some switches and changes? But alas, they didn't do that. So
my big question, again, and I'm not saying this to be critical of Hallmark at all. I'm not being critical. I'm just like a fan wondering. I would wonder if Hallmark's biggest risk is, do they become a studio and no longer a network? Meaning they have a really powerful brand, but it's really expensive to run a network. And, as I think Bill's finding out with GAF and GAC, whichever it is, never a great acronym either, GAF or GAC. Those small outlets, you got a window to try and survive and grow at a time when everybody's consolidating. And Hallmark has a very valuable brand. I would wonder if they can't keep growing to the degree that they need to grow, does it become more like a studio and other people take their product and put it part of whatever channels exist? Because that would be the risk. If things aren't going well, they become a studio and not a network, because that's really expensive. And you see networks dying, right? Cable networks are disappearing. That's probably their biggest thought every day.
We've had this little.
If you're not growing, you're going backwards.
We've had this little discussion recently because, as Andrew's saying, we're a little confused, and sounds like you are as well, with the whole Hallmark Plus and with the mysteries, particularly because they rebranded the mystery movies and mystery, just Mystery Channel in the spring, and then they started rolling out in the fall all of the mysteries on the streaming network. And to be honest, the quality of programming on the streaming network has been fantastic, which you'd think it's like, okay, we're putting it there to get subscribers, but what does that do to the Hallmark Mystery Channel? Because now why are you going to watch that when all of the good stuff is on the Hallmark Plus there? So we're really wondering what happens to Mystery Channel. And as you're saying there, now you're like, maybe it's too expensive to have this secondary, because it is significantly smaller than Hallmark Channel. Maybe it is cheaper, better business decision, really, just to get it over on that streaming platform.
Yeah, I don't know enough about the legal behind all of that. And let's not forget, technically, Hallmark's 3 channels.
Oh, yeah.
Which never happened, right? Bill started that. And And I was excited at that at first because finally, part of where I was always a thorn in their side when I was writing was I always wanted them to kind of put their big boy pants on a little bit with their drama offerings. Still be family friendly, obviously, but just have your adults behaving like adults a little bit more. And that would be drama, right? And you can have your more serious subject matter. And I know that was the intent, but my understanding was they needed subscribers before they could put more money into it. But how do you get more subscribers if you're not putting money into it and giving them the stuff? So it was like this, catch-22. So yeah, don't forget it. They've got 3 channels. Dramas, nothing's there, right? And if you're telling me Hallmark Movies and Mysteries, whatever it's called now, is not doing as well or not growing, and then now you've got a streamer. See, that's where I'm talking about you're bifurcated too much. Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying that like I know, but as I study the industry, and I'm a big student of the industry, I've been doing this for 37 years. Everybody's consolidating, focus, and obviously Hallmark's focused on their streaming, but I certainly don't see them surviving as 3 broadcast channels and a streamer, and then also giving their streaming rights to Peacock and anybody else. And also knowing Hallmark does not do particularly well in Europe and the rest of the world. It's far too puritanical for European taste. So they really only have the domestic pie, which is a big handicap, right? Like all of the studios need the rest of the world. They need China. They need, it's a big deal when a movie's not allowed to open up in China. So Hallmark doesn't have that luxury either. So they got to really hit it out of the park with their domestic audience. And Canada's so small, it's helpful, but it's got to be the US. They've really got that, and I'm sure a little bit, we would sell, I'm just remembering Cedar Cove days, a little bit in Germany and a little bit in Australia and some others. And we'd have to cater the shows a little bit to them. We'd have like a Cedar Cove for the United States and then a slight tweak for Germany. But when you have just a smaller slice of the pie, it means all that much more. You need to be really laser focused and not be too bifurcated. And so I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. The smart people there, I'm sure they'll figure it out. Yeah, I have the same questions that maybe some of you guys do.
Well, let's talk happy stuff.
Okay.
Well, looking back, so you mentioned Cedar Cove, and that was one that I know I've watched. Eric, I don't know if you've watched too much of Cedar Cove.
I watched a few, like half the first season. Actually, maybe the whole first season.
I watched all of it, and I thought it was just kind of one of those standout productions that Hallmark has had. And I know many who jumped into Hallmark a little bit later in years haven't seen Cedar Cove. So what do you think made that series so special? And for people who watched it, like I really was devastated when it didn't come back, because I'm like, it was such great characters, and you had so many great A-listers in there as well.
Well, that's nice of you to say. Cedar Cove is one of those topics with Hallmark where I sometimes have to be A, careful, and then B, how much of the behind the scenes craziness do I want to let out? There's a lot of crazy behind that show. What I can say is, all right, let's have fun. So I joined Hallmark around like 2012 with Cedar Cove. And that was, let's call that maybe the Hallmark 2.0 years, because that's when Bill Abbott was in charge of the network. And he hadn't been in charge for all that long before Cedar Cove. And he made the right choice of, hey, we need to get into original programming. They'd never done a TV series before Cedar Cove. And so somehow they ended up with me and Andy McDowell. I mean, it makes perfect sense to have Andy. Didn't totally make sense to have me. But what was going on then was they had never had a TV series, and Bill is a really, really hands-on, micromanaging president of a network. And he did not fully understand what was required of a TV drama. Namely, even in family-friendly Hallmark land, you need to have conflict. And so we had a terrific showrunner initially hired to run the show, Carl Binder. He'd had a lot of experience running family-friendly TV series like at CBS, for example. I think it was Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, that he ran for a long, long time. I mean, he was the right guy. He knows this genre inside and out. And he immediately ran into problems with Bill on that show. Bill would not approve any outline. And we were shooting. So Carl didn't write the pilot episode. The pilot episode, which was a movie, was written by this other gentleman who's, I think, mostly a playwright, but had somehow gotten the rights to Debbie's franchise. Again, a great, great choice. Debbie Maycomber is the right author for Hallmark at any time, but especially launching their first TV series. And Cedar Cove was probably the right choice. That was the right fit for them and the cast of characters for their audience. And the pilot, I think, was the strongest the show ever was. And it kind of went downhill after that for me a little bit creatively. But Carl very, very quickly was running into problems with Bill. And then Bill was having very, very, very big problems with Carl. And by episode 5, we had a big summit on set when basically they both went to war. And Carl was trying to educate Bill that even in family-friendly storytelling, we need to have conflict. And Bill was saying, this is Hallmark, we don't do conflict. And Carl said, well, I can't do my job. I can't give you a TV series. So what would you like to do? And so it quickly got really messy. Carl eventually left and said that was the most horrendous experience of his entire career, was running Cedar Cove at Hallmark, and he had nothing kind to say about the experience. And I was there, and I sympathized with Carl, and then I went through my own version of struggle as a writer-producer for the next 10 years. So I watched it first as an actor, and it changed. The show changed. Now, everyone was always trying to do their best, but Bill really, really controls everything when he's in charge. And I had my own disagreements with Bill. Lots of disagreements on Gourmet. But Cedar Cove struggled to find its footing because it needed to be more than When Calls the Heart. When Calls the Heart isn't going to have the same butting of heads dramatically because it's Little House on the Prairie 3.0, right? Like, it's the same thing. It's meant to be what it is. It's softer storytelling because what is it, the 1900s, still early 1900s? It's softer. They don't have more complex issues that we might have with more of a modern storytelling and relationships and dramas that happen. So that's an easier animal to kind of land. The battle that the discussions that I've always had when Hallmark is trying to do like a nighttime soap, and what is Cedar Cove? Cedar Cove's tricky because it had Andy's character as a judge. And so my argument, and Becky and I actually wrote at this time when Carl was clearly leaving and they were going to retool this show, Becky and I wrote on spec an example for the network of what the show could be. And I always thought it should be a little bit of a cross of Judging Amy meets Northern Exposure. I thought that would be a great fit for Hallmark when they're trying to figure out what is this thing that we've created. And that's normal for any network to kind of try and figure out. Like, the early Seinfeld episodes are very different than what it ultimately became. You kind of grow with it, the writers, and they realize who are the actors that they've hired, where are their strong suits and where are their weak suits, and then where does the show really take off? And you kind of go, oh, there it is. We go down this way. We thought it was here, but it's more this way. So there is a feeling out stage. And And Cedar Cove could have had a little more procedural with the court cases, which is interesting because that brings in an engine, that brings in a little bit of like a case of the week. And then you've got all the drama and funniness of a town, which should be full of quirky characters like Northern Exposure, right? And that's what an audience loves. They love to have familiar characters that they're in love with, and they just want to curl up with them every week because I love my characters, right? But then you give it a little bit of an engine of a procedural with a new court case that can also touch on topical issues, but in a soft way, in a heartwarming way, usually bringing families together. And that might have worked. And we would sometimes have a court case, but then it would go away. And then we get into the soapy stuff. But the problem is, where I was getting back to, Hallmark struggles doing soaps because what is a soap? If you're really going to do a soap, you have to have backstabbing. You have to have a little bit of sleeping around. You have to have a little bit of catfighting. You have to have a villain. You have to do the campy soap stuff. Hall can't do that, or they won't allow it to happen. And I would argue it's probably not the best foot forward, right? They're not going to do Devious Maids. That's not Hallmark. But if you're going to do a non-procedural, well, then you're only doing relationships. But if you're too soft, you just put people to sleep. So what are you? So I thought you could have leaned into the humor and quirkiness of the town to sort of bypass the fact that you can't have people sleeping around because the Hallmark's not going to do that. But you can go for the funny. Bill he didn't want to do that. Bill doesn't have a sense of humor, by the way. And that Bill's a wonderful businessman. He's not a guy for knowing what's funny. He shouldn't be around anything to do with comedy. He didn't want quirky characters because he thought that was the network making fun of small town people. And he couldn't have been further from the truth. That's exactly not what you're doing. You're leaning into quirkiness and the lovability of like shows like Gilmore Girls and Northern Exposure and like Ed. And what are the most iconic TV shows and characters of all time? Always have humor and quirkiness, right? Because that's what the audience falls in love with. You're not making fun of these people. You're embracing just charm and quirkiness. And you got this little town, and that's the whole point of my character, of Jack, who is this fish out of water. I was coming from the city, coming to this town. I'm looking around going, what the hell am I doing here? These people are kind of kooky and crazy, but I kind of love them, right? And that's where you're never making fun of them. And the audience is coming into it through my eyes because I'm the outsider, right? And then Andy's character is the one who's already been there a long time. And that's why we see each other. And I'm going, what are you doing here? She's going, what are you doing here? Because we both realize we're not really from Cedar Cove, but we love this place and we love the people despite the craziness, right? That's what brings people in, or at least should have. But that wasn't allowed to happen, in my opinion. How's that for a long-winded answer?
Well, I'm like, now I want to go back and rewatch the series. I have not watched it since it originally aired, so I can't tell you if I would still really enjoy it. I mean, now I'm very curious to be like, oh, would I be put to sleep by some of the storylines? I mean, again, 12 years ago, I feel like the storytelling has improved a little bit too on Hallmark, so it's a little faster paced. So
yeah, they definitely learned. They learned, and by the end, our Sue Tenney, who was brought in, she was definitely leaning in to try and bring the soap elements. But then, I had disagreements with Sue because I felt my character was no longer acting at all like Jack. Like we were betraying my character's actions. Yeah. And all actors are going to defend their actors, their characters, right? Because you can't just change characters to suit what you need to happen just because you're doing a 180. And so I felt like my character was acting very petulant and silly kind of by the end. And obviously the audience agreed because the ratings weren't there. And,
I do recall that. I remember being like, this doesn't seem like the same person.
No, because they brought in like another love interest, rightly so. Right? They're trying to do the
love triangle.
Sort of love triangle, right? But you can't ever say the word sex or have sensuality. Hallmark doesn't allow that either. Another big topic. And so that's why the battle always at Hallmark is to have adults act like adults and not act like juvenile children. Like Andy's in my care, like Andy's a federal judge. She's supposed to be about 60 years old, and I'm like an award-winning journalist. And yet we act like high school children at times. And I couldn't understand, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Your audience does not want this. And they always seem to be scared of the 10% minority that, yeah, sure, they're uber conservative, and they will be upset if there's even the suggestion that two consenting adults might have, spent the night together, even though you're never going to show anything, but even the hint of it. And yeah, sure, there'd be a couple of letters, but you can't run a network worried about that small percentage. And it's a very small percentage, obviously, right? Those people can go to GAF and GAC and watch that stuff. Let's have family friendly. So, what's crazy on this topic of what's allowed and what's not allowed? My wife and I introduce a lot of old movies to our kids. My son loves old movies. We watched Rear Window last night, Alfred Hitchcock, 1954, James Stewart. There was so much risque stuff in that movie, 1954, that Hallmark would never in a million years touch. But of course, it was totally appropriate. It's 1954. I mean, talk about the censorship panels that they had in 1954, and yet they were allowed to suggest sensuality and people sleeping over. And it's 1954, and I'm not allowed to do it on Hallmark in 2025. Or back then, what was that, 2014? And that's where the disconnect is for me. Like, Pixar makes the most nuanced, intelligent, heartfelt scripts, and they have all the Oscars to prove it. And those are that's kids programming technically, and they have Oscars. But Pixar does way more adult dialogue and nuanced and thought-provoking topics than Hallmark does. And that's where my battles always were. Guys, don't talk down to your audience. They don't want it, and you will grow your audience if you treat them like adults. And we can still have fun, and you're still going to have a 7-year-old, and you're still going to have your 97-year-old watching. Just don't have your adults behave like 13-year-olds. That was always my battle.
One of the interesting things is they recently seem to be listening, because Chicken Sisters did have infidelity, which shocked people when the character kissed, the other guy, the married woman, and that just shocked people. And then the other hubbub of in The Way Home with Andie MacDowell, they made such a big scene about, oh, Andie MacDowell in her underwear. And when it happened, it was like, wait, that was it? It was like such a non-issue, but it was like blowing up like, oh my God, what is Hallmark doing? They are no longer family friendly. By the way, family friendly can be a whole nother discussion too, which we're not going to do today. But because that would be, once again,
I'm sorry, guys. I know you're
hours.
Free channel, and I'm screwing this up. But
this is awesome.
It relates to all the mysteries as well, and it certainly relates to Gourmet. We'll get to Gourmet, I'm sure. So
this is absolutely awesome. Well, speaking of Gourmet, you were both a producer and a co-writer with your wife. So, like, you had to wear the multiple hats, and it sounds like you had a little bit of challenges and fighting to develop these characters in the show. Tell us a little bit about developing the show and what it was supposed to be and what it really is, because we both love it, absolutely love it, and just curious what it could have been.
Yeah. So, as I said, so I'm doing Cedar Cove. After the first season, it seemed like the show was doing okay for them. And I think I had tested well for their audience. And Michelle Vickery, who was then head of programming, who had a really good relationship with Michelle. And I think Bill liked me at that time. They were interested in staying in business with me. And so my wife had been out of the industry for maybe almost 10 years because she wanted to be home with the kids. And thank God she did. We just got the two most amazing kids, really, because they got the best mom in the world. She took, she left her career to be with them. But it was at this time when she was kind of maybe thinking about going back to work, And so I let Michelle know, well, hey, would you be open if I brought you some ideas, And I gave her my history with Becky and I, because we had sold pilots, primetime pilots together. And she didn't know. He's like, "Oh my God, yeah, absolutely. We'd pitch us some stuff." And so I convinced Beck, "Hey, look, why don't you put dip your toe back in and do it with Hallmark? It'll be easy. I'm already there with the series, right? They like me. It'll be a friendly room. Let's just pitch something." And as I was thinking about what I would do, I didn't want to do like a one-off movie. I wanted to create sort of like a franchise. And at that time, I was looking around what would kind of work for Hallmark. And Tom Selleck had the Jesse Stone CBS TV movies, which were these procedural, sort of melancholy cop movies of the week. And I mentioned to Michelle, I said, "Hey, Michelle, would you be open to like some kind of like a detective franchise, in the vein of Jesse Stone?" She said, "I can't believe you brought that up. We're in negotiations with him right now to bring that series to Hallmark because CBS is getting out of that business." So I said, "Okay, great. I'll do that." And so then I thought, well, what does the audience want? What would be a good fit? And I immediately thought of something around food because, and this is before all the food stuff. Like I really do believe I kind of like created this new wave of food related mysteries because it just makes so much sense for Hallmark, because what says family more than everybody around the kitchen table or the dining table and mom and grandma and dad, everybody's cooking together, and your memories of events over the years with family often is around Thanksgiving or Christmas dinners, or it's food, right? It's apple pie. What's more American than apple pie and the flag? And it occurred to me, this should be around food. And I don't know what yet, but it should be food. And we'll just put some kind of mystery or murder in there. And so what I actually wanted to do, which was not Gourmet Detective, it was a BBC series, and I've never mentioned it, called Pie in the Sky. That's the one I wanted to sell. And Becky and I partnered with Muse Entertainment, which is a big Canadian production company. We had sold something to them before. They knew how good Becky was. And they also knew how tight I was at Hallmark, and they did stuff at Hallmark. And so they jumped at the chance when I said, "Hey," and at that, the American president's a guy named Joel Rice, who's a good friend of ours. And I said, "Joel, would you like to partner with me?" Joel, Michelle, Bill, they want to do something with me and to create it. And, I'd like to do it with you if you're up for it. And he said, "Yes." So that they would take care of the rights to Pie in the Sky. I think Fremantle had it. What I liked about that was it was about a chef, and there was a case of the week, and it would make my job so much easier to just reinvent these existing half-hour shows. I think maybe they were half hour, maybe they were an hour, probably they were an hour, and then just modernize it and make it American, and it, no muss, no fuss, it'd be pretty good. But we wanted to take in two, and it was actually Muse that found Gourmet Detective, the books. And so I read the book and I went, oh my God, like great title, but holy crap, these are going to be really hard to adapt. Again, like I said, the character is very misogynistic. These were pretty dated. They were written in the 90s, but Peter had, they just felt a little bit dated for certainly the time that we're talking now. They all took place in Europe. There was no Maggie. There was no police station. There was nothing there to use other than a lot of food talk. And he had this great title, The Gourmet Detective. And he didn't even actually solve all the cases. He was just kind of there. So anyways, like we created the pitches for both, and we went in and pitched to Michelle and Bill, really hoping for Pie in the Sky. Sure enough, Bill chose Gourmet Detective. I think he loved the fact that they were books, and they always have a history of liking adapting books. I think they feel secure knowing that there's a story already there. If their writers are completely idiotic and bad, they can just hire another writer and just adapt that, just do it better, just do that, right? because it's not that these were very popular books. These are really small books. So anyway, all right, they pick that. Now we got to create, what are we going to do with this? And in the back of my mind, my other objective was, okay, we'll do a movie, but I'm going to create this to be a TV series so that it could act as a backdoor pilot for a TV series. Because, as I've said, I think Hallmark's strongest foot forward always should have been and still should be, they should have a procedural. They should have their version of Castle. It gets away from the dilemma of not being able to do soap operas, because they still can't really do that, I think, in a terribly exciting way. But if you're a procedural, which means you're either a hospital show, you're a lawyer show, or you're a cop show, you have a case of the week, it takes care of the engine, and then it's up to getting the right writer to bring in the softness, but hopefully fun, and make it a little funny, because that's how you get a really long-running, endearing show. They haven't got the money to do a really good hospital show because those are really expensive. They can do a good lawyer show or a good cop show. And so that was my other incentive. I'm going to create a world that has an engine. It's going to have supporting characters, and it's going to have a central character and a sidekick. And the audience is going to love these characters, and we're going to have plenty of places to go for story. We're never going to get stuck with not having room to grow. And so my original intent then, too, was this was at the time of the height of sort of the Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock movies, right? So I thought, what if, we use these elements that are in the book of this gourmand who has these really heightened senses, but also let's bring in some of these crazy observational skills, because let's have him be maybe just a touch on the spectrum, and let's have him be kind of funny with maybe some quirky behaviors that are kind of endearing, but it'll allow him to get hung on his own petard so that he thinks he's smarter than everyone, but of course he's going to be caught out, and actually Maggie's going to be the one who's always kind of driving it through and kind of rolling her eyes at him, and he will do just enough that's brilliant and necessary that they sort of unwittingly or just against their better judgment have to include him in solving the case every week. But that's the setup that you always want to have, which is Castle, right? Like, you have a man-child who has incredible skills and who you kind of hate being around, but also love him being around. And he's just useful enough that you got to keep him. I mean, that's just basic 101 writing, right? That you're not creating anything new there. It works for a reason, and it has worked for like decades and decades. From His Girl Friday, or The Thin Man. I mean, it goes on, Nick and Nora. It's gone on for decades, this kind of arrangement. Bill hated all of that. So we weren't allowed to have Henry have any particular great insights. We tinkered with it a little bit, and then they got cold feet, and it was all taken away. Certainly by the second, and I'll talk about the second movie, what happened there after the first. So we had to water him down. And that was okay, because we would still kind of try and give the writing some spice and bring it a little bit of prime time, but Bill wouldn't allow it. And so my first battles were, so what I had said was, look, we're going to give you Castle, essentially, wrapped up in a Hallmark bow. And there's going to be elements of Frasier, and there's going to be elements of Monk. Okay, you're going to have a guy, because he's a gourmand, and he's a fuddy-duddy, and he's going to be into classical music, and he's going to be into fine wine and fine food, and he's going to be educated, and he's going to be kind of not everything opposite of Maggie, but they got to be opposites that attract, right? And Bill did not want that, and I would go, but you air Frasier in reruns. You air Monk in reruns. So why am I not allowed to do it? And then that just gets them pissed off. You're not allowed to point out any inconsistencies in the logic. You just do what they tell you. But I was like, And it's because Bill doesn't like that. Bill wanted him to like football. And I say, no, you can't have Henry. He likes cricket, if he likes anything, right? He likes classical music. He's not going to listen to the Grateful Dead. I'm sorry. Bill wanted an all-American. He just wanted like the cool guy. He was like, Dylan, I want you to be the cool guy. Not that I'm cool, but I said, no, that's not what I sold you. I sold you Frasier. You bought Frasier, but now you're not letting him be Frasier. I was not allowed, so as Henry, when we were writing, originally, I was not allowed to mention a fancy bottle of wine. I was not allowed to mention a fancy food dish. He was not allowed to like classical music. He was not allowed, like the list went on and on and on. And I'm going, I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. Like, I sold you this, but you're not allowing me to do it. And again, I say, you air Frasier. I'm assuming it's doing well. It's all, irrespective of how well it does in Hallmark, Frasier is one of the most iconic television characters in the history of television. Kelsey Grammer has played that role for over 20 years for a reason. A, he's a brilliant actor. I mean, number one, he's a brilliant actor. He's so good. But it's what the character represents is not offensive. He was worried the audience wouldn't like him because he sees Hallmark as very blue collar, and they want football. They want Budweiser. And I'm going, no, I'm sure there's people there, but there's a reason Frasier is so successful. There's a reason that Monk is so amazing, and Tony was winning like awards over it. Like they don't look at these characters like that they're aliens. They look at them as they're endearing, and they might laugh at them, or they laugh with them. They don't laugh at them, right? And he's not going to come across as arrogant because he's going to screw up more than he doesn't. Like, he's going to make so many mistakes. And again, you get hung up on your petard in these roles. That's what makes them lovable, because you see that they learn from their hubris. Like, oh, I guess I wasn't right. I guess you were right. All right. But I was right about this, right? Like, you buy it back. And that's where you see the heart of the person, of the character. That's what Maggie saw in Henry, which is why she would roll her eyes at him and go, oh my God, Henry. But he would do something kind and loving and insightful that wins it all back. And that's obvious, but it was never obvious. Bill never liked it. Michelle loved it. Michelle loved the character, the franchise. And then what I think a lot of the audience liked, right, was that Brooke and I had really good chemistry. And that that's just luck, right? When actors get along. And Brooke and I became really, really good friends. But that was a long process too in the casting. That was not overnight. But so I think where some of the technical things, the writing that was not allowed to happen, I think got made up in the fact that Brooke and I had a really good rapport. And she's so strong at riffing that we played off each other enough so we could work with the reduced material enough to try and make something fun for the audience. But again, the secondary characters, we weren't allowed to lean into the Bailey and Monroe characters at all. And again, like a TV series, I was trying to fill out that police station with three-dimensional characters so that they wouldn't just go, hey, boss, look at this, in 2 lines of movie. Bill wouldn't allow that. So I was disappointed that I wasn't able to get those actors a little bit more. And that's why, and if you remember in the first one, you'll see I had an assistant, Lucy, I think, right? And Monroe was supposed to eventually, over time, have a little thing with her. And, everyone was supposed to have their own storylines a little bit to give this world depth more than just the 2 leads. Back and forth, and everybody's just filler. I didn't want filler. I wanted it to be a bigger world. But that was on purpose to give it an engine so that it could maybe be a TV series. Because I still think Hallmark needs their castle. They need a procedural. And I've been saying that for 12 years.
I agree with you. How did you then, so you had said that you had the pilot and then movie 2, things had to kind of change and shift between your characters. So how did you kind of maneuver that for the full 5 movies? Like, did you get a little bit of give from Bill?
It's funny. So after the first one aired, and we had bad luck. We were up against, I think, NFL playoffs. There was a vice presidential debate, and then there was something else. Maybe there was a hurricane. Literally, I'm not kidding. I think there was a hurricane on the East Coast. So our ratings were less than what they wanted on the opening night. Now, it did well later. As all of Gourmets is one of the best repeating movies they've had, which is why we got some more and why it still plays. But so get this. So for the second one, they decided, oh, we've made a big mistake. You have too much of a prominent role. You have to give Maggie twice as many lines. So I literally, in the script, had to give Maggie twice as many lines as Henry. Now, in the edit, maybe it got tweaked, so it's maybe not twice. But I was literally counting line by line. I had to count line by line. Maggie has twice as many lines as Henry. But it was worse than that because they originally bought 3 movies all at once. That was fantastic, right? Like this was a big deal. So when they did this in the room, when they bought this, they said, "This is so great you brought us this because you don't know this yet, but we're about to rebrand our second channel," which at that time was just a depository for like their library, right? And they would put off all of their old shows there, but they were going to rebrand it into this Murders and Mysteries channel. And Gourmet is going to be the first one. So we were the first one that they bought. They already had done some garage sale mysteries, but they were sort of just one-offs. So Garage Sale was the very first purchase. We're going to buy 3. Here we go. Fantastic. Well, I'm still on Cedar Cove. So I was like working like a madman. I was working, my 12-hour days, Cedar Cove. At nighttime, I was breaking down the 8 books I think Peter King has in the whole Gourmet Detective franchise because we were trying to figure, okay, what books are we doing first? We don't even know. Then so I'm creating outlines for what I think are the strongest ones. And we ended up with, I even forget which the Gourmet Detective the first one is. I think maybe his first book is called The Gourmet Detective. I can't remember. The second one was supposed to be Spiced to Death. And the third one was supposed to be A Healthy Place to Die. That was how Becky and I figured these are the strongest 3 to start with. It will create movement within the characters of the world as the audience gets to know them, and we'll unravel this onion this way through these 3 stories. Problem is we couldn't write all 3 at once, obviously, right? So we brought in 2 other writers. We had written the first one, Beck and I, and it's just like I had no life for months and months and months. I'm by myself up in Vancouver. Beck's at home with the kids. We're both doing it from a distance, trying to cobble this together. We brought in another writer who was trying to do Spiced to Death. That was just not going well. Bill didn't like what this woman was doing, and we tried to nurture it as much as we could, but it clearly was not coming together. And I think Bill had some other issues with it, and I won't get into that. But it was clear that was not going to be the second one. So then A Healthy Place to Die had another writer who got a little further along but was struggling as well. They were kind of struggling with a little bit of just Becky's dialogue and the wonderful banter that I think we kind of hopefully created between Henry and Maggie. And it just the tone and flavor was missing, and her ability to take our outline. We had outlined these for the writers so that they could hopefully fill it in. She got a little lost in the weeds of how to pull this together to get from A to Z and solve this mystery that's a little bit different than the book. So Beck and I took that over. But the problem was it should not be the second movie because they go off together. If you have seen it, they go off to a resort. Well, that's not a second chapter in a relationship, right? That is more of a third movie of like, okay, we've spent 2 movies together. Hey, you want to come on a weekend? I mean, separate rooms, but you want to go, away for a weekend? It kind of wrecked the flow of the intent, but we were up against, they had like deadlines, like we were going to go into production. And so it was one of the most stressful periods of my life. We had just finished Gourmet 1 Christmas of 2014, and I needed to deliver Gourmet 2 by February to start shooting. And I remember at one point trying to rejigger this outline in the acts, which is so much more complicated when you're doing a murder mystery than just a rom-com, where one piece doesn't lead to another logically, right? Because it's just a romance. And with murder mysteries, you pull one thread and it pulls apart logic in solving the crime all throughout your acts. And I remember curling up in a fetal ball in our office that we had rented outside of the home. And I couldn't get past Act 6. I was so lost and under pressure to deliver. And I remember just being like at the worst low of my life, it felt like, professionally. I had no time. We had to deliver like a whole script in about a week. And I couldn't put it together in my head. I couldn't see the way out. And I'm in a fetal ball on the floor of the office going, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get out of this. And eventually you have your eureka moments and you get out. No, I'm not saying that that's a great movie at all. I think it's a thin.
That's my favorite.
Is it? I'm so glad. I'm glad you say that. I do love the whole pan thing at the end. Like, look at that. Do you see what I just did there? I love that, right? Because that was more of the spirit of what I was always trying to get with Henry, the silliness. Oh. Bill wouldn't allow it. But I snuck that one in anyways. I think that was maybe a little bit done on the day without Bill watching. I always felt that one was maybe a little thin because it's essentially a cabin in the woods. That's a writer phrase. Like jumping the shark is one. When you do a cabin in the woods, usually that's when a TV series is like five seasons in and you're running out of stories. And so you go put the whole cast at a ski trip and there's a big snowstorm and they're all locked in a cabin and then let hilarity and chaos ensue, right? That's the cabin in the woods. So it felt so early. It's just our second movie to have us all like trapped in a hotel. But anyways, I'm glad.
Well, a wellness retreat that gets me every time. So for me, it's a lot about the setting, and I was like, oh, I love it because I'm in the wellness space. So that did it for me.
And it's tricky too because the book was very unusable for that one. It was a crazy, outlandish story in the book. Like nothing was usable for our purposes other than that they go away to a resort. Now figure it out. Like almost nothing survived from that book. So to try and do from scratch, knowing in the other challenge with Hallmark, right, is you don't have much money for a budget when you're doing a union movie. We have about $2 million, which sounds like a lot, but when it's a union job, it does not last. And so you're trying to, what else can I do? I've got these elements. I'm in a resort and I can do this. I can't afford that. I can't afford that. I can do this, but that's where you get happy accidents. And some of the things that have actually turned out okay with Gourmet have sometimes been because we had no money and I had to come up with a fix. Like Gourmet 4 could have been a complete disaster. That was the first movie I started where the director and I didn't know if we could land the plane, that we were actually going to be able to finish it on time. There was too much to do. We didn't have enough money. And we started that not knowing if we could do it, which is not fun. I was really, really scared doing pre-production on Gourmet 4, all of them.
That's eat, dine, and be buried.
Eat, drink, and be buried.
Eat, drink, right.
Yeah. And I can tell you stories of that. But we started pre-production on that, $750,000 over budget on a $2 million movie. That's not a small overage. That's a major problem. And that was not my fault. That was because I had asked my producing partner a couple of questions when I'm writing it. Hey, can I afford this? Yes. Great. Can I afford this? Yes. Great. We get into pre-production. Oh, crap. Turns out we can't afford any of that. And they were major plot points. And so I had to, during pre-production, completely rewrite the ending. I had to completely rewrite some major scenes without losing the whole thread. And it was really scary. And then again, that's another one of those things where Bill nearly killed me. And I'm going off on tangents. Rein me in, okay, when I start going crazy, because I'll just talk forever here. But as I think I've intimated, getting to the finish line and getting a green light at Hallmark is an arduous task for a writer. And it's not just me, it's every writer. It's hard. It's painful. It's brutal. And so when you are there, you got the green light and you're shooting, it's just like, nobody give me any more notes. I'm done. Like I barely survived getting this far. And so I'm first day shooting Gourmet, literally first day, first scene. I'm on set sitting at a table about to eat in the scene. And I get a text from Bill going, hey, I just read the script. I got some notes. He's had the script for 5 months. I've gone through every note-taking meeting, like thousands of notes. I'm not kidding at times. It's hundreds and hundreds of notes you get. And he texts me on the first day I'm actually shooting, and he's got notes. So
that's hard.
Yeah, I didn't take the call.
Well, when you wrote this, did you know you wanted to star in it then as Henry? Did you write it for yourself?
Yeah, I did. And that's tricky because I'm not terribly funny. I've had sitcoms and I've done, my share of sitcom work, but I'm the straight man. My strength is the straight man. I set up the funny person. I'm not the funny person. And so for Henry, part of the learning process too, of why sometimes it's not been the way I've liked it, is because I was letting it down. We were always, Becky and I, writing around my weaknesses as a funny or not so funny person. And so that was a bit of a learning, what was working and what was not working, and then what are we allowed to do? So I was always a little bit disappointed in some of those areas with that. Yeah. But that happens for every writer. When they're in something, you have to write to your strengths, and you have to be aware of what your weaknesses are and try to write around it and let your co-stars lift you up with all of their great strengths, I
mean, you're probably hardest on yourself, because I thought I loved Henry as a character. So, and then, obviously his partner, Eric, loves Brooke Burns. So
Slightly.
Loves her. So you had talked about her coming in to get casted for this. And was that like an immediate, yes, you guys had that chemistry or spark, or did that chemistry build each movie? Because again, right from I just finished watching that pilot again, to review it. And I'm like, wow, you guys you had that connection.
I think it came in pretty quick. We had never met each other. And yeah, I mean, that casting was a bit of a funny process too. I'll give you a quick story on that. Like I've never publicly said this, but my first choice for that role was an actress maybe not many people will know, named Sheila Horsdal, who had done a few episodes on One Calls the Heart and has a long history. Like she works a ton. She's a really good actress. But she was my original pick for Maggie. And the network said no, because they just felt that she probably wasn't a big enough name for the Hallmark audience.
Okay.
But they had a list of 10 actresses they gave me. And it's every name you would think, going back to that time frame. So, yeah, like Laurie's on there, Candace is on there, Allison's on there, Lacey's on there. And I was going, no. Nothing personal against them, but either there was an actress there that I didn't think was believable holding a gun, or I thought there might be a power battle over this project, and this was mine. Some of those people, you go make your own, and I know you will, because these are just starting, but this one's mine, and I don't want a power battle. Or for whatever reason, I just thought that's not Maggie. That's not Maggie. And I tried other names again, and Michelle would go, no, you got to pick from this list, please. And so I had never met Brooke. I didn't know Brooke. And I got to that name. And so I looked her up and went, oh crap, she's really beautiful, which you would think is not a problem. But I was worried that, she's supposed to be a cop, right? And, Stana, what's her name? Stana Katic on Castle, gorgeous. She's a model. gorgeous. And that's prime time. Like, I get it. We're doing television. Everyone's going to be pretty anyways, right? Like, who are we kidding? And it's Hallmark. Everyone's going to be pretty. But I was a little worried, like, come on, like, she's really pretty. But then I watched some of her stuff, and she had played some cop characters. And she's actually good with a gun. Look at her, she can run. And I could see there was a tomboy, what I perceived, sort of like a tomboy streak in her. And so I said, yeah, I think I'll go with Brooke. If these are my choices, these are who you like. Yeah, I'll go with Brooke. And then we hadn't met. And so we met on set, like first day. It was our first time. She's like, hi, how you doing? Nice to meet you. Mind telling me what the hell we're doing here? And so we immediately had, like, I could see she's a really good person, and she was a team player, which was the other thing too. I have a general rule as a producer. I have a no asshole policy. I will not work with prima donnas. I will not work with jerks. I won't do it. I've been relatively lucky in my career. I've only worked with 2 difficult people, 3. Yeah. Yeah. Careful. And so I could see she was a real team player, and she was quick to laugh. Brooke is always quick to laugh. She's got a huge laugh. And so she's a good person. This is good. Okay. And then I could see that she took it really seriously. And then obviously pretty quickly we became friends, and we could play off each other in scenes. And so I think, boy, that was a really long-winded answer, but I think it came pretty quickly. And then certainly by the end of we're finishing this, we're like really good buddies. And then Becky and I were able to start to write to Brooke, which is what's really fun as a writer in anything, like on any TV series. Once the writers get to know your cast, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, or where, you always just write for the fun stuff. And so we always knew how Brooke would probably deliver a line. And that's fun to write to. And then, it should surprise you too with other stuff. But once you understand the character of the person you're writing for, that's when more fun comes out. That's the writer.
I did not notice that Brooke was gorgeous. So.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's always just her big heart we're responding to. Right. Yeah.
Yes.
No, and I'll tell you, but like, Brooke is such a good person. Like, she wins over every crew, every cast, like, immediately. She's just super kind, but fun, ready to just do whatever, whenever. She's up for just fun, but she's a really kind person. She does a lot of things behind the scenes people don't know about, to help people. And she's a really good person.
So now we all know she's basically a game show host. And one of the funny things about what you just said is that why watch those shows she's on? It's really interesting because I watch a lot of game shows. I love game shows, but she connects with the contestants. It's really interesting. You can see that she does like have this little personal connection with them that a lot of game show hosts are like, oh, hey, you're a new contestant. This very little thing. So it's not surprising.
No,
like you said, that she does.
She's exceptional. Like she's an exceptional host. And it's for a couple of reasons. Because I study that too, because I dipped my toe into hosting world, right, with Home and Family. And I love that world. And I would talk to Brooke about it. One thing that people may not realize, they're seeing it, but they may not realize what's going on. Brooke is very smart and fast. She's probably faster than me when we're doing live interviews or taping segments. I take half a beat because often what I'm going to say is maybe inappropriate and I have to stop myself, right? Because either my sarcasm or I'm going to say something and it's just wrong. Brooke is super fast and witty, and she'll keep up with anybody, which is why she's so particularly good at The Beast, right? When she's up against, I forget his name, right? But he's literally one of the smartest guys in the world. you have to have somebody who's super smart and quick to play opposite that. And she always holds her own, and that's why she got the Emmy nomination. She's a very, very good game show host, but it's not just because she's fast. It's what you're talking about too. You can feel the rapport that she has with the audience, and that she genuinely cares. She wants that person to win. She wants them to do well, which any game show host should do. But some people just excel. You can tell it's in their DNA that they're a good person. They want that person to do well. And then you add the personality and the sharpness, and that's the magic soup that makes some people really good and other people, they can't quite do it. It's a very difficult world doing talk shows and game shows.
Well, Dylan, we asked for an hour of your time. You gave us an hour and a half. We had a whole list of questions, of which, when I'm looking at our notes, red, right? Because your answers were so insightful. Could not thank you enough.
They're just long-winded.
You really did, with not terrible, I don't think anyone's going to be like, I hate Hallmark now or anything like that, but you really did pull back the curtain and help us understand a little bit more what goes on there. And I think as fans, it's really helpful. And like I said,
like I'm not mean to, I certainly hope that I don't come across like I'm bashing.
Not at all.
They've gone through different periods, right? And Bill's not there, and Bill had his hands tied, and I could talk all about like what happened there at the end. And then, Bill got put in a tough spot. And I think the new people there, who I don't have really much of a relationship with, I know that they're trying to figure out what is the right fit, and everybody's got an opinion on what Hallmark should and shouldn't be, and you can't really win, it would seem like. But I'm a big fan of family-friendly entertainment. My only issue has ever been, I don't believe you need to talk down to your audience, and you can have multi-generational audiences and still have a little sass, a little fun, and intelligence, and everybody's going to have a good time. And I don't worry about offending the 5 people who are always going to be upset about something. I don't worry about that small little kernel group of people. You just want to grow, and you want to give great entertainment that has just a little meat on the bones, just a little meat on the bones sometimes. That's all.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. We wish you well. We hope to see you again in more endeavors. We love you.
Do you have anything that's coming up at all?
No, I don't. I'm sort of at a period in my life. Like I said, I'm really lucky. I don't have to work. I think my time at Hallmark has come to an end. They've told me I'm too old. I'm too old to be a leading man. So, okay. And as a writer, I think both parties have moved on. So I will do something. All of my projects that I had with them are not moving forward. I'm just deciding, what am I going to do? I'm taking my time. I'm kind of focused on my kids launching off to university. I got 18 university applications I'm overseeing right now between 2 kids. It's a gauntlet. And Becky's working on her own stuff, which is giving her a lot of joy, right? We're trying to do a lot of Marie Kondo stuff here. What sparks joy in our lives, right? So whatever that's going to be, I don't know. So I only audition every once in a while. I know there will be another script at some point. I don't know what that'll be, but we'll see.
Well, good luck, and thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you very much.
Guys. My pleasure, and thanks for having me, and go enjoy some gourmets.